We're one of the best teams from our region. I'm really hopeful if we were to make it to Beijing or Shanghai.
Bueno, yo quiero demostrar que la región de Latinoamérica Sur no es tan pequeña como parece. Creo que podemos hacerle frente a cualquier rival y bueno, me gustaría demostrarlo este año.
Về mặt tâm lý cũng như là các chiến thuật để có thể đối đầu được các đội khác.
我觉得我可以表现得不错，大家也很认真，然后练到很晚。
我们队伍至少要到16强。
솔직히 위에 올라가는 거는 현실적으로 많이 힘들다 생각하고 그냥 최대한 많은 경험하고 갔으면 좋겠어요.
強い相手っていうのも分かっているので、それでも僕たちもたくさん練習してきたので、自信持って僕らの方が強いっていうのを
Hello and welcome to day 3 of the play-in stage from Wuhan, China. Groups A and B delivered on the world's hype, and we'll be looking for Groups C and D to do the same. You can see the stadium here in Wuhan. Fans, I think, are ready for another set of games. You can see the new groups taking to the stage. Players ready from young generation as well. Kaos Latin Gamers getting ready for their first match.
So relaxing a little bit right now, going over the game plan one last time. It looks like they don't seem too stressed for their first match of the day.
I'm excited. Group C, Group D, we're going to have a lot of new teams, new interesting play styles, going to see some conflicting stuff, and Mark C is finally going to get to experience what good League of Legends looks like.
I watch NA all the time. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, all right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Dracos, joined by Mark Zimmerman. Our special guest is Andrew Vedius Day, known maybe as the host of Picks to Watch. We've been told you'll be doing all of your analysis through interpretive dance.
I shall indeed be doing all of it through
we're waiting
interpretive
for a
dance.
sample, I think.
Yeah, I think as we move through this segment, hopefully we get to see
Once we get to some of the teams that we're talking about, I'm sure we'll find many different ways of interpreting that dance.
All right, well, last night we locked in our first 4 teams heading to play a knockout stage, and now it's time to see who promotes from the remaining 6 teams. In Group C, we have Fnatic from the EULCS, Young Generation from the GPL, and LATAM South's Chaos Latin Gamers. Then in Group D, we've got Hong Kong Attitude from the LMS, the TCL's 1907 Fenerbahce, and LJL's Rampage returning to the international stage. We're going to see how things shake out with their first game at Worlds. We're going to start the day with Young Generation taking on Chaos Latin Gamers, followed by Rampage versus Hong Kong Attitude. Both groups, of course, are going to be completing their first round robin by the end of the day. Now, last night we did see clear dominance from the top teams in Group A and B, but there were actually a lot of surprises when it comes to those number 2 seeds coming through.
Right, I think when you talk about the strongest teams in each group, no surprise, the major regions dominated for the most part. Cloud9 was very aggressive. They were smashing people sub 30 minutes. That was all very impressive. On the other hand, WE took a slower approach and actually dominated through the macro game, showing that they had a better understanding of that than the emerging regions that they were playing against.
Yeah, and speaking of those emerging regions, Lion, they demonstrated they definitely know how to team fight. They were able to match in many instances some of the individual strengths that WE demonstrated, but when it came to being able to control objectives, being able to set a vision, using side lane pressure, some of that fell short and they were often punished for it. So while they demonstrated a lot of individual talent, unfortunately they couldn't quite close the gap between Team W.
But still, I think incredibly impressive when we look at the expectations laid down upon Gambit coming into the tournament. Lion were kind of under the radar, but they did come in strong, definitely smashing the games that they did play. But really the big standout to me was Team 1, who looked very weak on day 1, but then seemed to turn everything around.
I think that's the big thing for me, is just that they had such a bad day 1, and then they were down to Direwolves in their final game of the day potentially, and then out of nowhere they're able to turn that one around. Then they head into the elimination, tiebreaker match. They smashed that game, and so it was very impressive to see them kind of collect themselves over the course of the day.
Yeah, and what I loved was the fact that they finally seemed to draft the way in which they did domestically, because they were a lot on their comfort picks. Forlan finally brought out the Olaf, which he was 8-1 in during the regular
Someone didn't
season.
ban it.
Yeah, and finally gets his hand on it, and you really see the difference. So I hope that throughout the rest of the playing stages, they continue to stick to comfort. I don't want to see any more Jacks. I don't want to see anyone Italy. Like, I have some very odd interpretive dance for those kind of champions.
Okay.
So we're going to avoid that
Jack's
as
jungle,
possibly.
correctly?
Yeah,
Jack's First jungle. All right, well, maybe a little question, but now the question is, as we move forward, is there still that kind of clear favorite looking at Group C and D? Because I think Cloud9 and World Elite, as expected, were those #1 seeds. Is it the same story for Hong Kong, Attitude, and Fnatic?
I think for Group C, at least, it's very much the same way. You can expect Fnatic to come out on top. They should be very dominant. They were a fast team domestically. That should translate pretty well, just like it did for Cloud9, because they were also one of the fastest winning teams in North America. So it'll probably be between KLG and Young Generation fighting for that 2nd seed.
Yeah, it's certainly looking like that in Group C, whereas Group D, definitely looking a lot closer, much harder to predict who will be sitting at the top of that group. I feel like HK not coming in as the strong favorite, especially when you speak to a lot of analysts pretty much everywhere, because everyone has different opinions about who's going to.
Yeah, and especially you two.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. I'm ready to prove this guy wrong.
Well, hold on, but I mean, the thing that also makes it much more complicated is, of course, there has been the emergency substitution move has been swapped out for Crash on 1907 Fenerbahce, so that also does make it a little bit more difficult to predict, because it's hard to say exactly where 1907 Fenerbahce is going to stack up against the competition.
I'm looking forward to seeing the different contrast with the two junglers, because from what I've heard, Move was much more of a slow, passive, kind of controlled early game jungler, whereas Crash, he's all about getting in your face, stealing away your camps, setting up his laners for success, and it's just two very different styles that could very much affect how well 1907 Fenerbahce perform.
I like the idea of it because here in North America, we saw what can happen when you take an aggressive jungler and sub him in. Mike Young was someone who came out flying out of the gate, and in these best-of-1 setting, that could actually work pretty well for 1907 Fenerbahce, so we'll have to see if that actually plays out. It can also hurt the synergy, and there's a lot of
there's language barriers. Exactly. I think at the end of the day, so many question marks across the board, but looking at those 3 teams, I think what makes Group D so hard to predict immediately for you guys?
I think it's just because there's not such clear, obvious a powerhouse in the region, whereas like Fnatic was very strong, Cloud9 is very strong. They have these long histories of dominating their region and then moving on to, actually all things considered good performances on the international stage. Most of the teams here in Group D do not have much of an international history, so there's not much to see how they play outside of their own region.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. And also when you look at all the teams, it feels like that they have very clear weaknesses and very clear strengths. But each one of the teams have very different clear weaknesses and strengths. So it's very much about which team can better capitalize on their opponent's weaknesses while also making full use of their strengths.
Yeah, a lot of stylistic matches in terms of teams. But now let's take a chance to look at some individual talent from Group C and D. Best of the Rift, presented by T-Mobile, America's best unlimited network. Now, these are the 5 players that we want you to keep your eye on to steal the spotlight at Worlds. And first up, I think no surprise to many, it's 1907 Fenerbahce's Frozen.
Yeah, this guy is kind of the superstar for the team. They play around him a ton. They'll move to him, bring resources to his lane. Even when he's playing different champions, you see he was playing Lulu in this clip. Sometimes he's playing Aurelion Sol, and no matter what, it feels like the team is always collapsing to him. They play through him, and then that transitions to a strong team fight phase later on in the game.
I'm really excited to see him play and how well he will perform with his new jungler, but we've also got to look at how the jungle support synergy is going to work out in Rampage with Dara, because he's been a part of the staple roster for Team Rampage, and I think that right now he's shifted his focus from being more of a roaming around dominating sort of support, but trying to set up his AD carry for success. Yutori, Moyashi, definitely one of the 2 bottom lanes that I'm really keeping my eye on.
And of course, I think no surprise to an English-speaking audience, AD carry for Fnatic has to top the charts to a certain degree. Reckless coming in as a player to watch. Mark Z, you may not have
heard of this guy.
He's like the EU double lift.
Oh, they must be pretty good then, huh?
He is in fact pretty good. Most notably, both him and Jez down in the 2v2 lane have been dominating the majority of Europe, even challenging that of Sven and Mithy of being one of the best bottom lanes in Europe. So it's very exciting to see how well they will perform as they return to the international stage once again, but definitely a fan favorite from the side of Europe.
And speaking, of course, of AD carries, Unified coming in for Hong Kong, Attitude as well. Maybe not as well known as Reckless, but definitely a guy who has been a huge playmaker for this team since they've started stepping up in the elements.
Right, I think that was one of the big things that started working out for them was he started smashing laning phases. They could play through him. They had someone to kind of bring their jungler down to, and they can blow up leads very quickly. And then the team fight phase, he's pretty strong there as well. It does have a little bit of that craziness that can sometimes break out when you're playing Tristana, hops into dangerous situations, but for the most part, it's been working out just fine for Hong Kong Attitude.
Yeah, has been a good look overall. Last but certainly not least, jungler for Chaos Latin Gamers, Tierwulf. Now, we highlighted Schernfire previously. We like these active junglers on the world stage. We've seen how impactful they can be, and Tierwulf definitely feels like no exception.
Yeah, another guy who's also very vocal as well. He's the leader for this team in the early game. They do prefer a little bit of a mid-game, late-game macro style, but they rely on his early game playmaking to get them there, buy them the space in the room to scale up. And he's someone who's very, very confident. You can hear this whole team talking about how they kind of want to be the A and X for this year's Worlds. They want to shock everyone, show that their region is legit, and bring a lot of pride to their area.
All right, well, we'll be seeing which of those players put on carry performances all week and beyond. From the first blood till the Nexus explodes, you can follow the best of Rift in more places than ever before. T-Mobile, America's best unlimited network. Now, gentlemen, as we get a little bit closer, I think it's important that we talk a little bit more about the groups and what we've seen so far in terms of the emerging worlds meta, because it has been, I think, a little bit different than we expected. I think the big standout for me, Xayah Rakan, the first thing I want to go to, I know there's a lot of talking points. This used to be the OP duo, at least in Europe. I know it wasn't quite as focused, but why are we seeing this allowed through picks and bans so frequently?
It feels like there's still a fair amount of attention in the bot lane. Like Kalista is something that's been banned a lot. It has gotten through a couple times. Hasn't actually looked super impressive, but I feel like that's more about teams' inability to really use that champion as a team, because that's a champion that requires everyone to kind of, do a big gang up in the bot lane. You have Kalista start off with her ultimate. We just haven't seen them execute on it, but I think it's still a very strong pick, as well as there's a lot of focus still around the support position. The Rakan ban has come through a couple times. People are taking away that. Alistar, Thresh, Braum, there's a lot of stuff down there.
I think it's very much to do with, number one, the most recent nerfs that Rakan had, where now he doesn't get 100% of his bonus movement speed. When he's using his W, it's now only 30%, which means that it's a little easier to react to. But on top of that, it seems like teams have found answers in the form of things like Alistar being a really good counter pick, but also like we've seen Taric coming out from here and there, which I thought was a little bit of an odd pick, but it seems to be something that teams are just popularizing more and more down in terms of the support role. And then when you have champions like Tristana, just to add up to that, they tend to hold their own against Xayah. So it just feels like initially Xayah is a very strong AD carry that's very well rounded and can provide a lot of self-peel, but like teams are finding alternative answers to this power couple in the bottom.
It's interesting, especially in the context of these groups, because we do have a lot of strong AD carries. You look at Yutori Moyashi, you look at Unified, you look at Reckless coming into this group. It feels like hyper carries being the name of the game is so good for a lot of these teams.
I think that is very much the case. You see a lot of these crypt builds now. It's not so much just one-item power spikes, though. That still kind of happens a little bit with how strong you see the, oh god, I can't remember the name of it.
Ardent Censer?
Ardent Censer, thank you. Yeah, that item is still very, very strong. It's kind of, you see people even taking Targons on the AD carry to get their support to that one-item power spike even faster, so.
Gold runes as well,
yeah,
gold per 10 runes. It's getting a little ridiculous at this point.
And that feels like the other half of the support meta, right? That we have seen banned out a little bit, maybe not picked as much as we expected either, is the Jannas and the Lulus and these champions that are just going to rush Ardent Censer every single game. I think we did have at least one game of the classic Targon's Brace Ancient Coin bottom lane, yay for solo queue, right?
Yeah, that's a little scary. There is still a fair amount of Targons based on supports just in general, because a lot of these champions that do build the Ardent Censer lack some of the explosiveness that the other melee supports bring. So you'll still see a ton of Alistar. You've seen some Braum. You'll see some Tahm Kench, different things like that.
You'll also likely see some Sivir today coming out from the side of Fnatic, a big pick that has been rising in terms of Europe, mainly as an answer to Tristana. Good scaling, teamfight AD carry that actually holds her own during the laning phase as well. So we may continue to see shifts, but for me, one of the big meta shifts has been the lack of Cassio in the current mid lane, because she did receive a very small nerf to her base damages, but because of how you usually build Cassio, mainly going for just a lot of mana and resistances in the early game, what a lot of mid lane pros seem to be identifying is you actually lose a lot of damage once you reach this mid game, because you're not building AP until later on. And the one Cassio we did see went back to the Rod of Ages build to compensate for that.
And that did feel very difficult, right? Because it feels like a small nerf, but when you think about how many Twin Fangs are cast consecutively in a lane, I think that nerf starts to stack up. But the interesting new addition to the mid lane was played by Jensen, was that Rise that Cloud9 brought out. Similar build, it was the Abyssal Mask, and I'm wondering, is this now going to be a little bit more of a staple in the mid lane in terms of kind of shakeups than what we've seen in the mid lane?
I'll need to see a little bit more of it, just because we saw it played by somebody else, it got destroyed, then Jensen plays it, smashes with it, and it felt maybe a little bit of an influence based off how good the players are. I want to see a little bit more data before I say it's 100% going to take Cassio's place, because it had been a staple in the meta for so long. It still has crazy DPS despite the nerfs, so it just feels like it's a little bit weaker. And Rise, while it did get a nice buff on the W scaling, that's not quite enough to make up for it in my mind.
At the end of the day, I think the last thing that I want to talk about in regards to the meta is the jungle pool. Sejuani, I think remaining, or even rising, it feels like, in priority, where in the past it has been a wide variety of picks. J4, I feel like seeing a lot less time in the jungle. Sejuani, why do we feel like she has risen in that regard, or do you disagree? Do you think there's something else that's kind of taken her slot?
I think the thing about Sejuani is a lot of people consider it to be this scaling farm sort of jungler, but because of how her 4-hit passive works, you can have a surprising amount of burst. And when you set her up with really strong laners in the form of things like Syndra, maybe you have an Alistar in the bottom lane, Cho'Gath in the top lane, you actually have a lot of strong laners in the early game to allow her to provide additional CC to then set up your laners for some early success. So I think that she's just a very well-rounded jungler right now that has good clear, good scaling, and can fit into a variety of different comps.
I think some regions still ended up preferring Gragas over it. We saw that in North America, at least, that while we understand that Sejuani is super strong, some people still have a preference with the Gragas pick, and now with some of the nerfs that came in for Gragas, it does make you kind of have to say, like, yes, Sejuani is probably the best pick to take if I want to tank in the jungle right now.
All right, well, now taking a step back, you know, the meta has been shifting. It feels like teams are adapting, though they are keeping up so far, even though we have seen some crazier style. Is there any team you think that stands out in terms of showing us something new, showing us something unpredictable? Because we saw, no surprise, I think Gambit Gaming coming in with some special picks, but is there any other team that we think is really going to start to shake things up, that's going to push it out? How much more wiggle room do we think there is within the context of 7-18?
So this might be a little off the cuff, but I'm looking at young generations being very close to the Gigabyte Marines. And when I think about their playstyle and from a region, how a lot of it revolves around the jungler, we've already seen Lee Sin come out earlier on in the tournament. And just a part of me feels like we could see that return, especially when you think of some of the competition that he's going to be going up against. Players like Broxah, they're not actually that active in terms of the early game, or at least they haven't been in recent weeks. And that could be a point with which they could look to take advantage of.
I'm looking a little bit more at Group D. Rampage, if anyone's watched some of their finals, there is some crazy stuff going on in Japan right now. They had some quirky mids, things like that. So I would expect to see some more crazy stuff being picked around there. They also have a pretty high priority on Trundle for Rampage specifically, where they're trying to counterpick the top side, a lot of tanks that are being played. So they have some interesting picks over there.
And I also think if we're going to give any advantage to Rampage is that they're used to playing in metas where things are a little bit different than what everyone else is used to. They're used to adapting to new picks. I mean, we saw them play against a Heimerdinger mid in their finals, and this wasn't a Heimerdinger mid. I know you're not excited about it.
We'll get into that later.
But it was effective, and I think we have to talk about a little bit when it comes to these best of one. We've talked about how these matches can be do or die. Sometimes throwing a curveball feels like a really viable strategy to find an edge in these group stages.
It depends on the curveball, though, right? Like, I'm going to reference back to this Jax jungle because, hey, you got the counter pick up top lane, good for you, but you've also got a redundant jungler that doesn't do anything and also built Righteous Glory. So I think that while it can be good and it can throw people off, it's also one of those things where it has to still fit within the realms of the meta. Does it offer strong laning phase? Does it scale well into team fights? Can it offer you good objective control? These are the key things that are really important in the current meta.
And I think the big thing for me is people sticking to their guns, because we saw a lot on the first day where people would say, oh, let's change up our playstyle to counter this other person. So you saw with Jensen in particular, people put a lot of attention to try and hold him down. They had special counter picks, and it's like, no, that's not quite working. Stick to your style. Do what works for you, and don't focus so much on taking stuff away from the opponent right now. Do that in the ban phase, not necessarily with your picks.
Ultimately, why do we think teams are doing that? Because I think you're correct in that we've seen a lot of teams over-index when it comes to beating an opponent's style rather than playing their own game. Is this just teams? I mean, maybe you just have to respect that #1 seed, right? And you're just doing everything you can to shut them down rather than looking internally.
I think for some teams, like if you haven't scrimmed this team and played them a couple times, you might not instantly realize that that's actually not viable. I think if you're saying, okay, well, this team hinges on this one player, let's throw everything we can, the kitchen sink at this guy to hold that one guy down. And then it doesn't work and that guy goes off. So I think you wouldn't have known that that's never going to work if you haven't played against it or you haven't watched a ton of that region play. And that's something where, you know, when you're talking about Fnatic, people talking about Broxah maybe needing to step up a little bit. If they've done a lot of research, you might not need to attack him quite as heavily, though it seems like a weak point, right?
It's one of those things as well where, you know, just using Fnatic as an example again, you look at Reckless as a player and he has quite a history behind him, right? And you think, oh, that's quite scary. I don't know if I want to give him that comfort pick. Maybe we just take him off this one. Oh, but he's also got this comfort pick, so maybe we should take him off this one then. Oh, we'll take the third comfort pick. Yeah. So now he should have nothing left. And that way, he's not going to be able to perform. And then my AD carry can go even with that AD carry. And it's just one of those things where this is not a reliable strategy at the World Championship because you're now playing against the best of every region. And champions are not necessarily what determines the individual skill of a player.
And the good news is I think that C and D have, right, is that they may not have as much time to prep for the bracket stage, but they do get to see the meta. They do get to see how teams have kind of attacked these bigger region teams. And we did see, for at least in the case of Cloud9, in the case of Direwolves, when they matched up again, they kind of identified, hey, we can't play around Jensen. They tried instead going to the bot lane, and while it did not work in the end. The first 15 minutes were very dominated by the Dire Wolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something where you have to realize that composure is a big part of this as well, because Dire Wolves were a team that seemed to have advantages against a lot of people that they were playing, but as things started to come off the wheels, they did not keep it together quite as well as some other teams. There's so much pressure in these games that the team that has the better mental fortitude often comes out ahead.
Definitely the case. Of course, a lot to see here from Group C and D. But while you're tuning into your favorite teams all throughout Worlds, make sure you check out the newest additions to the Riot Games merch store, highlighted by the new special edition figure, Radiant Wukong, specifically crafted to celebrate Worlds 2017. Find that figure, its exclusive in-cane icon, and more at merch.riotgames.com. Personally, I like the spin, I like the animation, I think it's adorable, but before we jump into our first game of the day, Fish was able to catch up with Worlds veteran and Hong Kong Attitude coach Tabe. Let's hear what he has to say.
Standing here before as a player, now you're coming back as a coach. How does it feel to be back at the World Championship?
Hi guys, I'm Tabe. I'm very happy that I can come back to S again because it has been 4 years since it's in S3 when I was a support in Royal Club. And I'm very excited and happy because it's my first time to be a coach in a team, and it's success to comes to the stage, play in stages. I hope my team can do the best today, and I think we are in a really good status now.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, it's been a long time since you've been back. Now you've moved over from the LPL to the LMS, and I've been told since you've joined HKA, you've changed the team's mentality from more of a team-based game to more solo queue-esque mentality. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about this?
Because I think most of the good players in LPL and LCK, their solo queue ranks are really high. It's like challenger tiers 700 or 800. But most of the players in LMS, they have a slightly lower ranks in solo queue. That's why before we start practicing and training, I emphasize that we need a really heavy training in solo queue. And I requested like every single player in my team should have at least master rank. That's why in the early stages of our team, I don't scrim much, but I hope they can put more time in solo queue.
There you go, guys. Wise words from Tabe. The key to success is in the solo queue. Keep that one in mind. Last thing I want to ask is, for HKA coming out into the play-ins today, what can we expect from you guys?
I expect we have a clean win today, winning Turkey and RPG, because I think although we have number 6 in LMS, we are not doing really good, but during the playoffs, not playoffs, how do I say? The gauntlet? No, I mean, how we get the third ticket. The game that we get the third ticket, we really did really good, and I think we have improved a lot because we scrims with a lot of strong teams among the whole world.
Well, that's great to hear. Good luck later on. We're going to send it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Fish. Now, hello, everybody. I'm Devin Pirating, and helping me put on my best World's face is, of course, Zach Rusty Pie. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I've got my World's face on already.
It's
We'll see if
on,
we can find
like
yours, but no, I'm very excited.
Somewhere around here, absolutely. Now, we'll get to see Tabe's team take to the stage a little bit later, but we're going to go ahead and set the stage already for our first game of the day. Is going to be Young Generation versus Kaos Latin Gamers. We got to see, by looking at the starting lineups, taking on the Rift for the blue side in game number 1, it will be Young Generation. Straight out of the GPL, of course, in the top lane, starting, it is Ren, joined in the jungle by Venus, Naul on the mid lane, bot is BigKoro, their support Palette, and their coach, Tuanku. Now joining us for a special pronunciation lesson, making his World's 2017 debut, it is David Freak Turley.
Yeah, you know, I was required to be on the World's broadcast. Thankfully, for everyone's ears, not as a caster, only as the hype man to announce the red side, Kaos Latin Gamers. In the top lane, you know him, you love him, MANTARRAYA. MANTARRAYA to his friends as well. In the jungle, Tierwulf, Plugo in the mid lane, Fix in the bot lane alongside their support Slow, and their coach, Pierre, even though it's not pronounced that way.
Also known as Pierre.
Also known as Pierre.
We might leave a few R's off that one, but thank you for coming in for that one, Freak, and we'll try to match up to it during the course of the game.
I believe you. You're better than I am.
Oh,
I got you, fam.
Such a
Big
good guy,
ass.
always. All right, well, I mean, that's definitely quite big words to live up to. We'll see if we can manage it. Now, for Chaos Latin Gamers, they're playing on the world stage. It's marking a very, very big crescendo to their 4-month-long redemption story.
Yeah, I mean, redemption is the key word for them, right? They went from relegations in spring to winning it all in summer. They were in relegations, and suddenly they're the best team in the entire region. And you'd have to ask yourself, why is that? Well, they've changed roster, but it's also led by the veteran Plugo in the middle lane. He has been a standout performer for this team, and more so the franchise player of the roster, because he's still there and he's recruited a team of what I would call friends.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an important thing. You want to be able to play with a lot of guys that you all know and trust. Plugo had the chance to go to other teams. He had the opportunity to kind of move on to other things, but instead he's like, no, this is the roster I want to build. This is who I want to stick with, and this is the chance at Worlds. Now we'll see if they can keep up their momentum from the summer versus Young Generation, who represent the GPL off the back of the performance by the Gigabyte Marines at MSI. It's the first time we have a second seed from an emerging region.
Exactly right. The first time we're going to see a second team from Vietnam competing at Worlds as well. So congratulations to them. Of course, the Gigabyte Marines are the reason that they got them here in the first place. And there couldn't be a more fitting team to do so, because you would almost call them sister teams with how good of friends YG are to the Gigabyte Marines. They scrim all the time. They even delayed their flights just to scrim Gigabyte Marines that little bit more. So you will see a lot of reminiscence through the style of play with which they want to win Young Generation when they're playing League of Legends.
Yeah, they're definitely solid players all in their own right and taking a lot of leaves out of the book of the Gigabyte Marines. Of course, the individual carry players might be a little bit different. When everyone thinks of the Gigabyte Marines, you talk about players like Levi. It's a little bit more bot focused for this Young Generation.
Yeah, you wouldn't say they have a Levi. They don't necessarily have
they've got a
that Levi
Venus.
through the jungle. They have a Venus, but what they do have is a big Koro. Not your average Koro. It's the biggest of Koros, and he is a big carry for the team as well. A lot of the focus, a lot of the priority, and the way they win around Summoner's Rift. What was Levi for the Gigabyte Marines is now shifted down to the bottom lane for Young Generation. They still have that style. That's the thing that we have to bring it back to. Aggressive, like going forward, like making big plays. They've got abstract picks, they've got abstract styles, but they're constantly in your face, forcing things from you. However, that is now going to be reflected more so through the bottom lane. So there's slight extra reservations in that style, and there's a bit more thoughtful play coming across.
Absolutely, and I really want to see how they end up in that laning phase, especially because BigKoro is the kind of player that will play these ridiculously high damage champions that are very risky. We've seen him on Kog'Maw. You know, there's a lot talked about his pocket Draven pick, and anytime you have an AD carry that likes to do stuff like that, you know you're going to be in for one of those very ham laning phases.
Yeah, there are only certain people around the world that will play Javen and have that in the competitive champion pool repertoire that they've got for themselves, and that does say a lot about the player. You're absolutely right, Pyra. And generally that means they love to get the gold, they love to be the carry, they love to have that go-forwards mentality. And the rest of the teams there very much to support him in doing so. Pallet and Venus, a lot of priority towards the bottom side of the Rift, but that's even matched through Chaos Latin Gamers, their opponents in game number 1. They really do like their AD carries. The whole group, in fact, loves their AD carries.
Oh, yes, indeed. Now, Fix really focused a lot on picks like Caitlyn during the course of KLG's qualifier into Worlds, and that was way back on patch 7.15. You got to think things are going to change up a little bit here as we get ready into picks and bans. We'll find out what they decide to grab off the start of things, and looks like we'll be loading up any minute now. The players are getting ready on stage.
You are looking towards an AD carry focus. You're looking towards the junglers as well as a big point of contention, perhaps some shared champions. We heard a lot on the analyst desk as well as about how Xayah and Rakan may be two champions we shouldn't see together anymore based off groups A and B.
Yeah. Well, there's the Caitlyn off the board, so we'll definitely have to see KLG taking something a little different. It's followed through by Kalista, so the AD carry bans continue, and now Shen banned away from MANTARRAYA.
Yeah, 2 AD carries removed. Of course, we may start seeing more as a result of that. Xayah and Tristana are the 2 ADs that still stand out for me as things we may want in the first rotation. And now we start to stretch our wings out towards the rest of that bottom lane, it seems.
Yeah, well, Thresh is already once banned away, and on Chaos Latin Gamers side, they take away a pair of junglers. It's Rek'Sai followed by the J4. I guess J4 up in the top lane, that's always another possibility. This looks like it's left the Xayah up over, and has been a fairly popular pick, so Young Generation snag it away.
Yeah, they'll lock themselves up. That Xayah, very good champion, forces almost the Rakan on the opposite side. You don't necessarily want to give that duo, and so perhaps the analyst desk's dream/nightmare immediately comes true. The Jarvan ban, as you mentioned, good flex though, and Rek'Sai taken from Venus. He is a good Rek'Sai, and that's another target ban from him specifically.
Clearly KLG doing their homework, and of course they snag a solid jungler of their own with Sejuani being picked up. Now, do we get to see the Rakan here on the next one? Or do they think maybe they can get it away?
They might go towards something like the Tristana. If they have a higher priority in another role, then things may change. I expect
Rakan if they want to deny it, or I expect Tristana with an Alistar as their third pick if that's how they're going to play the 2v2. Usually that's how those duos match up.
All right, so they've got it. We'll see what ends up happening once we get down into the Rift, but back to Young Generation for the time being, and they'll probably want to snap up a jungler as well, since once they hit that second phase of bans, Venus might be looking for slim pickings.
Yeah, they played a bit more standard here. Of course, Rakan is an expectation once again as Xayah is there, but we look past that pick, and what else will go with this roster? Well, Sejuani's there, so if they really want a jungler to prevent the second ban phrase from inhibiting them even further, then they may go towards that.
Yeah, and if you want something that can do engage, that can match in the early game, of course, the Gragas is always one of those stock standards. And for YG, so you expect the Rakan here, maybe something a little different will come out. And it looks like it is. It's a Braum, so they want a little more tankiness.
Yeah, so the expectation of that duo lane is completely removed. Once again, Braum to be picked, and he doesn't know the rest of the finished team composition, essentially, of what Chaos Latin Gamers are going to put themselves together with. But I am okay with Braum. I just feel like, you know, the option of Rakan was there with the Xayah. It just empowers him so much more.
Yeah, giving up quite a lot for that to happen, and I wonder if this won't come back to bite Young Generation. We know that they're a team that loves to skirmish over and over and over again. And yeah, you're going to be able to stack a lot of CC thanks to the Braum passive, but is it going to be nearly as effective as the engages you can do on the Rakan? Now the Lulu comes in for KLG. Now we're back into ban phase 2. Nar's off the board.
And that is that big point that we have to bring it back towards. Nar is a good ban from KLG because, once again, where is the engage from the right? Now, Gragas has good engage. Braum can early, but it's not as reliable. There's a lot of outplay on that fact. And when you go past this, I think the reason Braum was locked in at all is just because that could have been picked by KLG to deny the Gragas engage in the first place. So they've picked themselves up this hybrid composition. Now they need to round it out.
Okay, well, Jace off the board, Talia off the board. The Galio had already been removed as well, and that's something that Plugo played pretty extensively over the course of KLG's qualifier, and now 20 seconds still on the clock. Well, Cho'Gath's been left up and available, hovered right now, and it's locked in for MANTARRAYA.
And they've got the Sejuani already locked in, even though Tierwulf can flex the pick, so it's going to go towards the top lane for MANTARRAYA. And now the team composition missing that one more member. The counter pick to be there for Plugo, but he's already being targeted.
Yes, indeed. Looks like with the Syndra, Naul, definitely one of the star players on this Young Generation squad. And that's a very powerful pick, and might be looking to set them up for some early game plays as he locks it in.
Yeah, not just the only star player on the team, however. They've got the Syndra, they're waiting for their top laner, and that's the other person that we have to highlight as Renekton does get locked in. Ren is not Nocti. Now, when they got here in the finals, it was a 5-game series. They lost 2 games, but then the hero comes in. It didn't feel like he did a lot, he just played Galio, but he was able to get them back and help them get those victories.
Yeah, Ren more of the carry style player. In fact, it might be even short for Renekton. So he gets his namesake on that one, and now with the final lock-in, Plugo grabs himself the Orianna. They have a pretty wicked ball delivery system, though, when you look at it.
Yeah, they can, if they really want to go deep, they've got a Tristana-Orianna combo, but you've got the Cho'Gath and the Sejuani. You've got the people to stand in front. And for me, looking at KLG's complete composition, it's front-to-back strength from them. 2 big tanks, 2 big carries, scaling's quite nice. Lulu to protect all of them as well and empower them further, trying to deny any kind of backline dive from Ren in this case on the Renekton. He's going to have a pretty rough time getting to that backline if KLG play it front to back.
It seems that for Young Generation, they're going to have to rely a lot on being able to do a lot in the early game, ganking up in the top lane, letting Naul get some early kills off of roams. Young Generation, they're not afraid to start fights when and wherever they please, but will it be enough to get them ahead in the early game? That's the question.
Yeah, and that's that interesting part. If they're ahead, they can probably stay ahead with the composition they've got for themselves. They've subscribed to the Renekton mantra of, I'm just going to win my lane, control my lane, get that CS advantage, and if a Renekton's ever ahead, usually he's going to stay there. You can commit to the split pushing build. You can have the Blade of the Ruin King if you would like, something that we've seen from the occasional Renekton when their goal is to win the 1v1. Always a possibility here for Young Generation, but they've got the Syndra. If Syndra ever starts snowballing, we've seen it from even Xayah earlier in the week. You can have a monster performance.
Yes, you can indeed. Now, Young Generation KLG going up against each other here in this clash. On the other side of the groups, we'll see who comes out on top of it. Young Generation, they have a lot of early game pressure, but remember, there is a player on the opposite side of the board whose entire strategy is getting his team ahead in the early game, and that is Tierwulf, and we'll see if he's able to match the pressure of Venus.
It certainly is. Tierwulf likes to throw himself at lanes more than he does jungle. 51% jungle proximity for him specifically. And
more than half his time.
Yeah, that's proximity to laners or allies, I should say specifically. He doesn't necessarily like MANTARRAYA as a lane to gank. He does like his bottom lane, and that's where we look at, just with these two teams on Summoner's Rift in general, how they got here. was by camping for BigKoro, camping for FLICKR, get them rolling, get them ahead, and watch as they do the rest of the work for you, just by being that tank.
Well, the Battle of Flares has already begun. And there's a dance party down in the river.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's how you start your Worlds experience, right? I mean, it's a big deal for both these teams. Young Generation, this is their first international tournament at all. I mean, they've only competed in the GPL and, of course, the local Vietnam League.
Well, they live in the shadow of the Gigabyte Marines. That's something that is very hard to break out of. They even lost to the Gigabyte Marines. They're 1-6 against them in the regular season, but they're here now. They've been gifted the opportunity by the team that bests them often, and so they can only be grateful for this opportunity and this chance to show that it's not just the Gigabyte Marines that are a strong team in the Vietnamese region. It is, in fact, 2 of them, maybe 3 of them. Maybe the whole region's great, and we just haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, well, and it's not just Vietnam in the GPL as well. It encompasses a number of other countries in the area, and that is why it's such an impressive feat to see not 1 but 2 teams out of Vietnam.
Yeah, he didn't run the Vietnamese gauntlet by themselves. The VCS wasn't the only thing that they had to win here, Young Generation. It was also the GPL tournament. So they get themselves where it matters most, and now they have to go up against the Kaos Latin Gamers side.
Yep. We'll see how KLG can do in this early game as well. So Venus kind of a little bit back and forth on the early start, goes for the Raptors, gets the hard leash, and he gets his red buff quick on to level 2. Tierwulf, of course, he's on it as well, but that's a little bit after he'd already started on the chickens of himself. And we'll see if they end up moving towards the top after it, as they both move towards that side of the jungle.
Yeah, ultimately just clearing on the opposite sides of the rift right now, though. Tierwulf is going to be significantly further behind, compliments of that super leash that Venus just received from BigKoro and Pallet. So he has the opportunity to level 3, he can go towards top lane, and he has the momentum through exactly that. But Tierwulf, he's got his red buff and he wants to secure that Scuttle Crab, and it looks like he's got those XP points.
Important to get the vision out early on, but Venus, he just wants to start fighting already, throws down the barrel. A couple more auto attacks. Tierwulf, he might have to burn his flash. Arctic Assault, he's not going to have it. Ren was even coming in there and a blast cone taken. So Young Generation, they want to get this one started with a lot of action.
Very greedy from Tierwulf to go towards that Scuttle. Not knowing perhaps where the enemy jungler started, he tries to get his eye in, but Venus, with the super leash, already level 3 to that of the level 2 the Sejuani was running around with. So they get the flash, but not only that, he's going towards where the Renekton is winning his top lane in the 1v1, has the control, has the pressure. Bit of disrespect perhaps, or just trying to sneak it before they could get there.
Might be able to do it. Now MANTARRAYA coming in here, knows that something's up, sees the Krugs being started. Venus with the double buffs, gonna get the smite down on one of those Krugs.
Okay, MANTARRAYA's got like 3 seconds to exit the arena.
Yeah,
right
he needs to leave right now. This is gonna be a little tough for the level 3 Cho'Gath. Tries to steal back a few more Krugs, but it's nothing doing, and there's no jungle backup coming.
No, there's not. However, he knows exactly where the Gragas is. He knows that Sejuani's got free time. Not only is it just the Sejuani that gets free time, you're looking at it right now. FLICKR and Slow have got all the time in the world to be a Tristana and a Lulu and harass and pressure. So MANTARRAYA doesn't do the wrong thing by any means. He's actually still at full health and okay. He wasn't going to be able to farm that lane 1v1 too successfully either way.
Yeah, his job's not going to be to win that lane. Cho'Gath will become pretty relevant as it goes on, and for the time being, this Tristana is a living terror for BigKoro and Pallet down in the bottom side, and you can already see it reflected in the health bars. A whole lot of harassment. The Lulu comes out as well with the Glitter Lance, help picks, and everything. Tierwulf is going towards the bot side as well. So is Venus. We might be in for a 3v3.
But Tierwulf is going to be here first, and he might have just missed each other. I don't know if there was any vision. There was no ping. Oh, no.
They still don't know.
What are you doing
now
here?
Tierwulf does.
There was still a ward there, so it's okay. KLG make the right moves. They're looking. I don't know.
Does not land Winter's Bite the Pallet.
This is to give the recall, actually, for BigKoro and Pallet. They're losing lane so hard. Venus just wants to assist them. Tierwulf was nearby, so I commend this, actually, from the side of Young Generation to allow them to recall.
It's funny you don't get to see the junglers getting that close to each other without actually spotting out, but KLG definitely gunning for the first turret. It's already down to half health, and that's what happens when you have a Tristana Lulu.
Yeah, they're
a lot
hard
of damage done.
They're against the Braum Xayah, and Xayah does excel at pushing waves, however. So, I mean, it's correct that a Tristana and a Lulu can push and harass successfully, but this is a whole lot of that.
No kidding. At least they have the Unbreakable to be able to stop some of the damage. I suppose if you have the Rakan, it gets even more difficult. You've got shields, not quite as effective.
Yeah, well, Braum's got the door, but at level 1, it's all about those auto attacks. And I think the Lulu and Tristana, between the two of them, have enough damage to compensate and win that. And I feel like a lot of Xayah's strength when it comes to pushing is actually at that level 1 mark. You press W, you throw in all the feathers, you hit level 2, and you actually have all-in threat. So.
Yeah. Well, they knew they were going to have to be in for some survival. Of course, the Doran Shield was the first item of choice for the Xayah, making a lot of sense to get a little extra damage onto those minions. And with the first back fix, picks up his pickaxe.
We have a very different back when we look towards the middle lane, however. Plugo's gone towards the Lost Chapter, where it's the Dark Seal and potions for Naul. He doesn't even have a refillable potion. Just straight up buying those red potions, and could be inefficient, may start to pay off. We'll have to see how it pans out, because right now, you'd argue Plugo significantly stronger.
And he has the level 6 comparatively. Naul only just hits it, so the Power Unleashed is available. Venus spotting out the ward, but Plugo's playing pretty safe. I mean, it's hard to gank an Orianna, man.
I feel like if that control ward was just a little bit further right, one teamo to the right in the same bush, to be able to spot that ward, it's not going to be the case. In saying that, it also means that Chaos Latin gamers don't know there's a control ward in that bush.
So for all the early aggression that we've seen out of both teams moving around, we haven't actually gotten first blood here at 6.5, but the laning phase definitely trending a little bit towards the top side, pushing in as the Renekton is want to, but down in the bottom, KLG, they should be able to secure this tower if all things stay equal. Of course, they don't always for long. Now we'll coming down on Braum.
He's in.
Oh boy. Get the slow onto slow. Scout of the week, not going to connect. 2 flashes burned and the Power Unleashed on top of a heal, and they're going to be able to secure it. BigKoro with the first blood.
Big plays from Pallet to make sure that he's got 3 procs on that passive. The stun from Braum is the only thing that secures the kill at the end, but Plugo, he's looking at his own opportunities, it seems.
All right, Shockwave up, see if he grabs it. No, gets nailed. Oh, flash forward, that's going to pull in too. There's an Unbreakable on and a teleport coming down for Ren. Fix and Plugo got to bail out, and there is not a whole lot of mana there. Let's see if Ren keeps going forward for the flash. A couple of Coles, and Plugo, he's just trying to walk away, but he's got nothing else he can do. Cole in the meek, it's Ren with the kill.
No culling, no summoner spells there for Plugo. Very nice cleanse from him, but the cleanse only does so much. It forces a flash out of Ren to follow up and secure that kill. But that's the kill they're after now. 2-0 to Young Generation, and what started with none very early has started to explode just that little bit more, and it's on the back of Naul.
Making good plays, the faster roam, and burning so many summoners, that means you can start going down there once again. We thought Venus might be the one to watch, but yeah, the solo laners definitely coming up with some big plays. Now Ren back up to the top side, has some relief as he lost out on a little bit of farm making that play, but the kill is more than going to make up for that. Fix and slow, though, they're not deterred at all away from this turret. They just don't have a whole lot of minions to keep pushing with it.
And so they shouldn't be, though. The vision has still been theirs throughout all of that. Even the invade and the gank, rather, that happened in the bottom lane, Naul walked over a control ward. They weren't controlling vision. They just walked down and made the play. And it was successful, granted. Maybe should not have been because the vision was there. Slow was very aptly named for how he was trying to escape that gank. Of course, we get to watch this again. Syndra comes in. Slow, he gets hit. And so the fact that he's tagged out, autoed once again, that's where he dies. The 2 auto attacks weaved, however, from Naul. And the Storm Raiders surge, giving that bit of extra move speed for the last auto attack is what secures it in the end. So maybe the Thunderlords, maybe not this time.
Well, there's always next time for sure. Now, it's good that BigKoro gets the kill at the end of the day too, because he's been pushed back under tower. You can see it in the farm differential, 73 to 48. Now he's got the kill. It allows him to get his boots too a little bit quicker than he might have been able to prior to this. So, you know, he may not have the damage, but he's certainly going to be mobile enough. And we talk about Tristana being one of those late game hyper carries. BigKoro is going to be one as well on this Xayah.
And it's always nice to force out the pickaxe purchase from a Tristana opposed to a BF sword. So the fact that he's gone for his Berserker Greaves, he's got the 2 longswords and that first blood that you mentioned, means that he's pretty well equipped for this exact point in the game where he maybe should not have been. The turret is still the concern, though, that lingering problem that Young Generation have got to face against right now. It could fall down at a moment's notice from just the 2v2. It is the first turret in the game, and so all it takes is a wandering Tierwulf to show up in the bottom lane.
Well, Tierwulf is often wandering, but mostly with the purpose. On the Sejuani, we haven't seen quite as much effectiveness as we has out of Venus. In the very beginning, of course, he kind of got battered and bruised just a little bit trying to contest on the Scuttle Crab early on, and instead he's been focusing on just farming things up, working his way towards a little bit more tankiness as Venus moves up towards the blue to give it away to Naul. It seems like this is going to be the strategy. Once they start grouping up to try and make these big plays, the towers get knocked down, and we know Young Generation like to group up as 5 and just force all over the map.
We also know that KLG are not going to hesitate or be afraid of any kind of fights in the 5v5 sense specifically, so there's always going to be a world where KLG say, we'll match you, and we'll just see who comes out better.
Yeah, and as the game goes a little slower maybe than YG might have liked, this is great for Chaos Latin gamers. They do like to play it a little bit more deliberately. The late game, the team fighting, that's what they enjoy. Even if some of their games don't always go quite so long, then we'll see if we have another engage down bottom. Tierwulf, Naul. Ooh, Arctic Assault away as the vision was there, and now Fix not taking any chances.
You better believe that control ward is defended from the Syndra, and Gragas is farming that middle lane. feel like we've swapped roles at the moment. There's a different jungler in town. And he's still keeping up in farm in the middle lane as well. And it all just indicates, once again, he's got control of that wave, had the blue buff, is able to push, and then he's able to disappear. So nicely done from this mid laner of Young Generation.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason Naul's pretty touted as one of the team's top players. Always a wandering threat as well. We talked about Tierwulf, but of course on the other side, YG, they have a lot of damage in their pocket. We'll see if Plugo can maybe keep pushing him back, but it used to be a level advantage the other way. Plugo had level 6 first, but now Naul's on 9. Of course, that's what's going to happen when you participate in a few more of those kills.
Yeah, of course, we have to say that the Orianna is getting close to that level 9 of his own that he just ticks over to, and now that does mean that a bit more presence in lane is something that is being asserted by Plugo in particular. The reason that is important is, of course, the Q cooldown, the fact that you can spam the ball around, and as long as you dodge the stun, you'll tend to win most of those trades unless Syndra all-ins. So things start to shift in the middle lane. However, it looks like Pallet wants to say something about that as Plugo's hovering bottom.
Ooh, doesn't get knocked by the Scat of the Week, but Pallet has swapped right on in, and Naul tries to go unleashing the power, and the barrel comes out to secure it up. Venus takes the kill, and you better believe that is an insta-cancel on the TP from MANTARRAYA.
He didn't just take the kill, he ensured that he was getting the kill. That was a flash ultimate from Venus on like 10 health from Plugo. His flash was just on cooldown. There's the smallest of little lines that you could see on his flash timer. It's up right now. That's the difference between perhaps him getting out alive or not, or using more summoners from the side of Young Generation. Pallet's just at the correct place. Once again, in vision. You have to add that.
Yeah, and they knew they weren't going to be able to save the tower down on the bottom, so of course it does go over, but that's 3 kills to 0 in favor of YG. Now insta-cleanse as he gets the knockback, denying the kill onto Tierwulf. Ren and MANTARRAYA still dueling up in the top, but now this Cho'Gath, he's able to do a little bit more. He gets an eat on, but Ren's not down just yet. Oh boy, he's going in. Can he get the knock up? Tries for it, no! Running away from that scream, and Ren makes his escape.
Barely lives as the Renekton in that 1v1. That was a righteous glory. I did not expect to see that early. We get to watch this as well. The gank onto Plugo. Notice the control ward that Pallet is standing on. Plugo no flash though. Once the shockwave hits, and then Venus really wanted that kill so badly. But we have to mention that cleanse from Naul. That was as Captain Jack as you like.
Oh yeah.
So clean.
There was almost no time between actually getting hit. You know, he was ready from it a mile away, and pretty incredible. Didn't give up a death on that one. Now it is Infernal Drake, Tierwulf, Fix, and Slow are all working at. Venus realizes he can't really get in there. Has to concede this one up. So KLG have been going for the neutral objectives this game so far. It's Young Generation that have the kills, and that's only making up a 500 gold difference.
We've seen an awful lot of Infernal Drakes in this tournament thus far, and no exceptions as they do get that Drake. They've got that turret, so yes, the objectives are there, but with all the kills and those etchings forwards of a snowball from Young Generation, there is a world where things such as this start to happen, and then the gold lead that they still have, even with the turret disadvantage, grows.
Seems like both teams playing towards the win conditions that they set out for themselves in the pick and ban phase. But now MANTARRAYA, the tables are turning once again. He's trying to chase down Ren. There's a stop up for just a second. Grasp the Undying, a little extra health back, and he just keeps on sending those spikes into the croc. There's no help coming for him here. He's got no flash this time around. MANTARRAYA, there's the righteous glory. He's almost under tower, flashing forward. My goodness, he hasn't been able to get the rupture just yet, but MANTARRAYA, how far does he want to go? And he goes a numbing.
That's not even a level 11 Cho'Gath. This guy is unrelenting. Just let the man walk away.
Never gonna happen. He's making up for lost time in that top lane, being pushed in.
Missing like 10 minions to ensure he gets the kill. I like this guy already. He's got his priorities in place. He wants those kills. This is the price you pay for taking my turret.
It is going to be a little rough from here on out for Ren right now. He might want to go to a different lane. That's the advice I think I'd give him. Still, the gold lead's in favor of Young Generation, but they've finally given up the ghost on 1 kill. Check back in on the mid lane. Naul, I'm sure he'd be pretty happy with a kill of his own, but in the meantime, he's still a pretty heavy damage threat. It's just that Plugo not really biting on the Dark Spheres and Scat of the Weeks, dodging it out pretty well.
He has been dodging nicely, of course. Has those Merc Treads as the rushed magic resistance item for the move speed, the magic resistance, and he's pretty well set up as well with that cleanse that's almost back off cooldown. Now, you said that Ren may want a different lane. Well, it's not him that's going to choose that lane. It's KLG as they send Fix and Slow towards the top lane. They're looking to accelerate the pace of the game right now. They've got that Lulu almost at Ardent Sensor, but they've also got the Infinity Edge for Fix, and they can take apart turrets.
It is definitely going to be a wrecking crew up towards the top now. Plugo going to go ahead and secure himself up the blue buff. KLG wanting to be able to hold up. Oh, that's unfortunate. Can't get them all.
That's very tragic, because guess what? Syndra walking around with a blue buff. That means she wins lane. For those of you that don't mid lane, yes, it means she wins lane.
It's definitely the difference. Oh, pulls in one on the shockwave. Pallet's there. Tag his way in. Now, Tierwulf, he wants to go forward, throws down the Glacial Prison. Let's see if they can get the kill. MANTARRAYA out of nowhere, tanking off the tower. And there's a lot more Glacial Fissures going on up there. Now, BigKoro, he's got a flash on forward for the root. Can he make the play? Forces the flash into the wild growth, and Fix, I don't think he expected the turnaround there.
I don't think anyone expected that. There's a Sejuani to Cho'Gath moving, but Naul's up creek. He wants to make the play. Here they go.
Pallet. Oh, BigKoro playing a dangerous game. Pallet on the front line, looking to get the stun off onto Fix. Rocket jumps away. Stun is out of range, and now we're into fights, baby. Naul trying to get the deletion. He goes down, but he does take Fix with him. It's a 1-for-1 trade up top.
Yeah, Naul absolutely outplays him by pressing that R button and secures the kill. Fix is going to die in the end. It is a 1-for-1. You can see so much emphasis, though, from KLG in their rotations around the Rift as a team, doing everything in that 5v5, trying to prevent the individual members of Young Generation from continuing to be pesky and just making those plays.
Continuing to be pesky is, I think, a pretty apt way to put it there, Rusty. 17 minutes in, the dust is going to clear for a little while. It's still a slim lead for Young Generation, but now we are matched on those towers, and there's a lot of damage on the one up top. Let's take a look at that play one more time, a little extended engage.
Of course, this is the exciting part. Fix jumps forwards. He gets the reset with his last auto attack, I believe, as well. BigKoro dodges the ultimate, which is on cooldown now because of the ultimate use of his own. So the smaller details in the end almost added up for the side of YG. And then we get to watch the biggest outplay in the history of League of Legends from Naul as he looks towards making a play with Pallet. You can see, though, Sejuani and Cho'Gath are already working their way up to this area, so they've committed to the play, full well knowing that this might be suicide. And you take Tristana's biggest mistake was stepping forwards to get destroyed.
Yeah, that sometimes is a failing of a lot of AD carries. Sometimes you think you just get one more auto and get a kill, and then you get a face full of unleashed power.
Yeah, sometimes you just think one auto attack's all it takes. I'll just come and steal the kill. I'm the AD carry after all. I mean, the end result of this is still a win for KLG. Just hurts them that they give Syndra anything.
Yeah. At the same time, though, Ren has had some pretty free time on this bottom tower, and even MANTARRAYA knows he can't push him back off it. Might be able to kill him, but it's not going to stop. So trades all over the map, and now this is giving KLG the opportunity to try and pick up the Rift Herald. Probably look to knock down that mid lane turret after all said and done, but it seems like the team's matching pressure pretty well across the map.
Yeah, Ren has been trading nicely whenever the bottom lane of Chaos Latin gamers take those structures. They've got the pressure of the jungler nearby, and Cho'Gath disappears, doesn't have his teleport, so they're trying to exploit that exact fact. Ren has got his teleport up and ready right now. They could look towards making a play themselves if they so choose. But for what objective is always going to be the answer.
Yeah, it gets harder and harder once you start knocking those towers down and the map gets open, and have to go a little deeper to try and make anything happen on the map. And
good recall timing, though, from Naul. There's a Drake up in 20 seconds if they want to make that play. You look at lane assignments, firstly, for if the Drake is something they want to go towards. Well, Renekton's back top lane, so the answer for me is just yes, they want to do the Drake.
Yeah, and they have a teleport advantage as well, so MANTARRAYA, he has to stick towards the bottom or the mid if he wants to be able to help them contest it. KLG, 5 members strong. Well, MANTARRAYA is going up top, so make that 4. They're not going to give this one up idly either. It's a very important dragon.
No, Cho'Gath is walking down. They absolutely are looking towards fighting for this Drake. It's not an Infernal. It's not going to be the second, but a Mountain Drake means a much easier Baron secure. And so this is the direction they're starting to take this game. KLG, as of like 5 minutes ago, have said, I'm pretty sure we should just 5v5 them.
Yep. Young Generation more than happy to take.
But there's a teleport.
Starting. KLG see this one happening. There's a Glacial Fissure going to land on 2, and they knock him back with the barrel, unleash the power onto Slow. Oh, they get the stop up onto Ren for the time being, and they cut their losses.
Yeah, unfortunately for Young Generation, Ren's slice was straight into trees, and you can't slice trees with swords, he's just found out. Gets blocked by the terrain, he's not going to make it over the wall, but they get the pick onto Slow. No one's there anymore with a shockwave down to protect that Tristana. And so they take the safe option. They don't run back into the river willingly, they just seed themselves the Drake.
Yeah. A lot of less seasoned teams would just continue to take that one on, and we talked about how KLG, they looked at the leadership of mid laner Plugo, make those calls roam as 5. Sometimes it seems simple, but honestly, there's a lot of nuance to it to know when to keep going and when to back off.
Yeah, knowing when to back away is always going to be a big deal in League of Legends. Most people do not seem to know that. And so unfortunately, it usually results in their death. So good call from these guys. But at the same time, we have to compliment Young Generation for their collapse. They do this separately. You've got Naul and Pallet by themselves. The teleport comes in, and Venus and BigKoro on the other side of the river, yet they forced them into the choke point. They forced KLG into that small area so they can still get the collapse. Braum hits the Q on a jumping Tristana, of all things, as well, to try and make that a little bit better. So slow is the sacrifice.
Yeah, it means 5-2 is, of course, the kill score at 21 minutes into this game. And, you know, Dragons on either side, but Young Generation, they're the ones that are going to be able to shred towers and that all-important Baron. Once again, if they can get that one, start securing it, pushing down as 5. We talked about them being a little bit more of an earlier game team, but they still got power in the later stages. BigKoro is going to keep ramping up.
Yes.
He's only on his Essence Reaver plus Azeel right now, so he's only going to get stronger as the game goes on.
And this is that point in the game where Baron is the only real objective still left up for them besides inner towers. And they're much harder to achieve, obviously. But if you get any of them down, Baron's then easier to take. And that's the back and forth that we're going to be seeing from the LMS side. However, when you contrast that to Chaos Latin Gamers, they've got the Rift Herald ready to crush the Eye of. They've got the mid lane outer turret as something they can still take. And so if they find an opportunity where, you know, YG are just baiting the Baron, they're not doing the Baron, they can destroy structures and catch themselves up a bit more.
Yeah, might need to do it. You can see them being pushed back just a little bit. Tierwulf is going to crush that Eye.
I think it might have been out of cooldown, which is why he's used it where he has.
Got to throw it. Maybe they decide to push themselves as far as they can. Remember, it's a teleport advantage for MANTARRAYA now. So Ren would have to be walking up, and they look for Pallet as Tierwulf moves on forward. Naul's there.
They're trying to do as much as they can to the Herald before it bashes its head against the structure.
Oh, it's going. Not going to be able to get more than 1 or 2 extra hits, even smiting it down before the end. And Ren is actually not needed for all that to stop things off. So KLG unfortunately can't get a whole lot of value out of the Rift Herald. And
Still very good patience from KOG. They'll take the chip damage. They obviously did not want more than just that. Maybe if a pick happens, that's going to be the structure. But they want to play this one out slowly. They want to take the one big opportunity.
Yeah. Does he have time to roll forward? The Tristana keeps getting bigger. And speaking of big, look at MANTARRAYA right now. He's got his Warmogs all finished, and they want to start diving onto the mid, looking for Venus. Now, it's a 3-man stun. The tower is going to get knocked down. Unfortunately, no deletion possible there.
Yeah.
But BigKoro's up top.
Exactly. BigKoro is split pushing. He really likes turrets, it seems, and loses half of his health to it, whilst the rest of the team runs up towards him. So he's not going to be able to do damage for free. I don't even think he'd be able to 1v1 fix unless he gets a bit more health back into his health bar. But yes, they had to seed mid lane. They had to sacrifice that turret. Most of it comes down to MANTARRAYA being in the right place at the right time.
He often is, though. That is one of the hallmarks of that player. And Plugo, whoa! He was in the wrong place, but he didn't take too much damage. Not as many Dark Spheres on the ground. Naul even spent both of his summoners.
They both
did. The CC that hit him.
4 summoners burnt through the mid laners means with tank junglers running around and people that can catch you out of position, well, now they're going to be susceptible to exactly that.
Scary time to be a carry for sure, but Young Generation up on the top side, going to throw out the party barrel, looking for Fix and Slow. Can't land any further CC on him, and without a whole lot of minions, they're out of options up top side, but you can see that's not going to stop them from coming back for more soon.
I think that was adventurous from Venus in the way that he was using his cask in this situation, maybe looking for a pick. Oh, didn't stop him. Just barely. They know he's recalled, however. I feel like without that cask, though, they'll take the damage, YG. They'll take the chip onto the turret. They're happy campers nonetheless.
Cooldown's low enough for them not to have to worry about it. And now you can see that KLG, the long work has begun to start clearing the jungle of all those wards that YG have thrown down. And Baron's actually been procced as Tierwulf was trying to clear out vision inside the Baron pit. Pallet, a little bit of a cheeky maneuver by him, and it means Tierwulf's got to bail out.
Now, Tierwulf does have Warmogs. You can see that health come straight back immediately. And it's not just Tierwulf, it's MANTARRAYA that also has the Warmogs of his own. Second item, you have to point out. So a lot of health regeneration, not a whole lot of resistances.
That is the difference. They can fight a couple of times, but if they get bursted, that's always going to be a little troublesome. KLG, they really do like their tanky compositions too, and
yeah,
it's nice to see them coming up with a few extra carries. When they were qualifying up against Isurus Gaming back in CLS, we saw them really only play with one major carry, and that was fixed. This change of pace in the pick and ban is definitely welcome.
It's always going to be welcome the more carries that they can have, because we often question how much damage that composition that they were running through their finals was going to have.
Yep. And for the Cho'Gath too, at least they picked a tank that's going to do damage as well over the course of the game.
They've got a control mage in the mid lane, one major primary carry that will scale super well, and then the Cho'Gath that can deny enemy carries. So damage maybe not a factor. Plugo.
Oh no, we've seen this one a few times, and Plugo unleashed the power on him, and they even scatter the weak. The shield keeping him alive, and they got a wild growth on now. It's KLG's time to tag in. They pull back Naul, and Fix has got one, looking for the reset. He even dodges out the Glacial Fissure. That's the double looking for Pallet. Unbreakable, how long will it be? and Fix is backed off for the time being, but KLG, they find 2 kills, including the jungler. You better believe it's Baron time.
And Syndra's gone for a Banshee's Veil, so not enough damage to take apart Plugo. 2 MMR items of his own, and suddenly the tanky team of KLG, they're straight on the Baron. But one young generation, they're aware of it.
They're not done just yet, but MANTARRAYA turns his attention right on over. How much can YG do? Even Ren, he's in the back line. He can't make it happen. Enough Baron not quite resetting means KLG are right back on top of it. YG trying to be annoying to push them back. Let's see if this young generation can make it happen.
Looks
but they've
like
got no
secured.
spike contest. I think it's going to happen. Teleports on. And it even gets nommed by MANTARRAYA. That means Ren's going to cancel his TP.
Yeah, they have to cancel that teleport. Baron's secured, cleanly secured above all else. And it's at the fault of a young generation that this happens at all. They want Plugo. Yes, he is out of position. They've got no summoner spells on the Orianna. This is a good opportunity, they say, and they knock him in. 1 Q misses. He has the barrier up, that's the shield up rather, at the correct time, and Lulu comes in, but also dodging spells. So all of this time, reinforcements suddenly arrive, and the rest of the team fight is very clean and easy for them to secure. But all of this happens because one team wants to start it, they don't have enough damage to finish it, maybe a little bit of a misexecution.
Yeah, and as Chaos Latin Gamers were pushed back a number of times, all of a sudden the map is wide open to them. They've got Baron buff, and they're just going to march down as 4 into the mid. BigKoro, I don't know how much he's going to be able to clear. Pallets here as well to block a few more auto attacks. Still, they've got the empowered cannon creep, and the rest of the minions are conga lining their way in. MANTARRAYA blocking Ren from making a push down on the bottom side. And now KLG, it looks like it's time for them to start taking this lead, extending that gold up. It's only about 2,000. That's still going to mean a lot for a scaling composition.
Yeah, certainly true. Now, when you've got a Xayah on your team composition, normally you'd be like, yes, I love when they walk towards me. That is where I can get all my feathers laid down, have those big plays when I pull all the feathers back. But against an Orianna, that's not actually that easy. That's just not that simple when it comes to auto-attacking. Tristana's range excels as well right now. The situation where Syndra is barely able to even keep up with that. So ultimately, when they've got the Baron, when they've got the momentum, they've got 2 shields protecting Fix. You believe there's no minions right there, but he doesn't seem to care. That's how strong they are.
Yeah, this is definitely looking like trouble for young generation as they are getting pushed ever further back into their own territory. Finally, the tower is going to fall and a whole wave of reinforcement minions have arrived. Meanwhile, Ren is still trying to do work here, but he's being blocked off by MANTARRAYA. KLG, they might just start being able to knock into this base. Let's see if YG can push him back. Still some chip damage on this turret.
Meanwhile, Ren has been blasting the bottom lane as well. He's got the minions pushing in, which is why a lot of this isn't able to happen in the first place. Renekton hasn't recalled. They know very much that this is a 4v4, and so they start to push up. They start to pressure, and they poke around as much as they can, but Plugo no blue buff means that we're starting to see this run its course and almost reach the end of that. If Fix can get the turret, that's great, but it has to be soon.
I don't know if they fancy a fight right now. Pallet doing some serious work, but he's going to get pulled in. Oh, they get a cast back to knock out Plugo. He's almost out of mana. Not a whole lot he can do, but the rest of the team's going to attack their way in, looking for Naul. He's even able to make his escape flashing, as well as the cleanse. And without any more minions, it looks like young generation have managed to defend. All of a sudden, the 4v4 becomes a 5v5. MANTARRAYA slowly trying to walk away. The Baron only 40 seconds remaining, and I think that's going to be all they're going to get out of it.
At the end of that, nobody dies, so we get to reset one more time. They got some turrets, they got a lot of extra gold, KLG, so they'll be happy for that, but they didn't break the base, so this game is still anybody's.
It's funny how you say it, with not a whole lot of kills going on. You look at these two teams and the way they qualified, you could maybe forgive KLG for not being quite as heavy on the action because they're controlling the pace of this game. But young generation, they're a team that definitely likes to win through skirmishes, win through getting a lot of kills, and have they just been stymied this game is the question I want to put to you.
I wouldn't say they've been stymied at all. They've got a jungler that had control very early on in the game. By pushing out the scuttle, looks towards the camps that he's after. For me, the place that was slowed down, that was controlled, was the 2v2 in the bottom lane. The Tristana and the Lulu, in particular, had outright control. It required a lot of jungle attention. And I feel like that's where ultimately things started to shift towards the KLG side. But even then, young generation had good roams. They had the way into this game. They had opportunities to make the big plays. So it supersedes exactly that factor. I just feel like perhaps everyone underestimated KLG.
Very possible. It's definitely a team that I think is easy to overlook sometimes. Looking at the LATAM regions especially, a lot of people get a lot of hype for Lion Gaming and LATAM North, and when you see them face off against each other oftentimes in international tournaments, usually that's where a lot of the glory goes. But for KLG, I mean, this is a team that they've kind of been built up once again from scratch, but it's a name, it's a brand that a lot of people will recognize when they do play through qualifiers and on big international stages. They're one of a few teams that tends to take that spot. So you better believe they definitely know what they're doing, and especially with the veteran leadership of Plugo.
Yeah, absolutely. Plugo should be the center of the team. Looks like they've put out Pallet. Don't imagine that will result in anything else. So he just gets bodied around for placing vision. But yeah, perhaps that vision, the leadership rather of Plugo is something that can make the difference. Yet, when you look at YG, confident side, wouldn't have expectations on saying that that leadership means a lot themselves. They should just have plenty, but it's a young roster. First time they've gone to Worlds. And this is the thing. This is game number 1 for these guys. Days 1 and 2 of Worlds play-in stage was Groups A and B. This is the first time we're seeing Group C. This is the first game of Group C. You'd have to expect that there are some nerves, or at least caution, to be seen.
Yeah, not necessarily throwing everything you've got in every situation. And we've seen KLG also take a little bit of a conservative approach when they haven't needed to. We saw them back off on the Dragon when they lost slow early on. And again, it's not something you always see from the teams of the emerging regions. Sometimes they won't always recognize a bad situation when it comes about, but you know, this is a different breed of team for sure.
It's very hard to see a point now where Young Generation can outright come back into this game, to be frank with you, simply because the front line has 3 items for Chaos Latin Gamers. Their backline has 3.5, including a Hex Drinker, and that means that Syndra is not going to one-hit him anymore. You've got a very much unkillable mid laner in Plugo. You've seen that through all the items that he has already. Banshee's Merc Treads, the shields, and now they've caught Ren.
Yep, and there's not a whole lot the Croc can do. Tierwulf is going to cut him off, and Fix is going to grab himself the 3rd kill of the game. Looks like they're going to pull in Naul back in the mid. Even Plugo is out playing in the 1v1. Up against that Syndra. So things are definitely looking not so great for Young Generation.
And that's the other lane we have to look at. Ren has had little impact in this game, to say the least. He controlled his top lane for the first 5 levels, then MANTARRAYA was beating him in the 1v1. Renekton pretty much been an invisible crocodile.
We saw this also out of Young Generation's play qualifying for Worlds. They had to reverse sweep their way here, remember. They had a couple games on Ren, wasn't able to pick one up, and that's when they subbed in Nocti. We might start to see that happen again when we see the games, and now the fight is on. Looking for Naul! Not a lot he can do to get away from this massive Cho'Gath. Redemption comes in, but that's just tickling them with damage. Oh, and it's going to be a broken inhibitor. Down in the top side, Chaos Latin Gamers come in, and they just knock YG back.
They're also teleporting though. Renekton has decided that they really want this fight. Ren is going to get in the back line, but they know he's there. He's just walked over the dead Scuttle Crab. This is adventurous. He is by himself.
This is desperation right now. Ren, if he's going to go all in, no, MANTARRAYA blocking the rest of the team. That teleport, is that going to be for nothing? They still want to try and chase this Chaos Latin Gamers squad, but can they even find an angle? They're so far behind.
Well, now they're committed. They kind of have to team fight 5v5. The teleport was used, and Baron's on the board.
Oh, but the hunters become the hunted. Here we go. Tierwulf on. Looking for Venus. Gets the slow, gets the stun, and all of a sudden the rest of KLG come knocking. The barrel comes out, but it's a party for Chaos Latin Gamers. Shut down, though. BigKoro grabs one.
Got a flank.
Now Naul, he's going to be able to get around the side, scattering the weak. YG getting a little bit low as MANTARRAYA. Tierwulf turning. Plugo. MANTARRAYA gets another eat-off onto the support from Young Generation. Ren in the back line, but it's going to be Plugo flashing away, and MANTARRAYA is doing double time with a double kill, looking for a 3rd. Can he make it happen? It's Naul and BigKoro going down. That's the last man standing on Young Generation as MANTARRAYA is still going for the chase.
He's looking for a Righteous Glory. He's just off cooldown now, so he can walk up to him and blast him. But a big team fight victory once again from Chaos Latin Gamers, and that's a fight that Young Generation looked like they wanted to start. This is a lot of vision. They know. It doesn't seem like they care.
Why is Naul still here? Scout of the week back. Okay, he's going to walk away. MANTARRAYA is just terrifying at this point.
It's a nightmare of a Cho'Gath to be up against, except his battle cast. We get to see the replay again, of course. Venus, he was the member that gets sacrificed very early on into the play. Fix jumps forwards to ensure that, and when you're like, all right, it's good, he's got a reset. It's not good, he doesn't have a reset. He's cast into a wall, flashed on by Ren, and they immediately destroy him. And now they're doing Baron.
Pretty easy to see them taking this one without anybody in the area from Young Generation, and with how far behind they are, would have been very difficult all the same. So Chaos Latin Gamers knock down the big purple worm, and 35 minutes into the game, looks like we are reaching for the end of this one, Rusty. It's a 5,000 gold advantage.
Certainly feels that way, of course. Now you look towards just finishing the game off. If you are KLG, you've got that one fight left for Young Generation. They've got a 3-1 AD carry. they do still have 4 completed items for their Syndra. Capabilities to win a team fight, you would argue, are there if it's a 4v4. But Cho'Gath's just grouping. He has the teleport. They've got the teleport advantage. And now you just look towards which lanes they want to attack. There's only 2 left.
Great way to beat your opponent. Don't present a weakness for them to exploit. Chaos Latin Gamers demonstrating that as they look to close this one out, and it's going to be oh so hard for YG to hold on to their base. They've even needed to send Venus up to try and push back the wave on the top side with the supers going in. Now it is the bottom. The last tower outside the base remaining. Tierwulf even looking for a pick onto BigKoro. Goes for a Blade Storm. Featherstorm, I should say.
Forces the ultimate out, though. I'd say that's a pretty worthwhile trade if you're the Sejuani, not if you're the Xayah. Because now the carries, the shockwave, it can all connect onto that Xayah. He can die very easily. A lot less outplay to be seen. And the siege has begun. Top lane, minions are starting to mount, starting to push. There'll be a super wave that starts to crash. So in a minute from now, maybe, that's when it breaks open.
Get an eye on Plugo's positioning. He steps a little far forward every now and again, but just ever out of range of the CC from Young Generation. And here with the minions coming in for round 2. Tierwulf, MANTARRAYA taking everything up. They get a Rupture landed onto Pallet, and that tower is cut through like a hot knife through butter. That is what a late game Tristana will do for you, and now it is open inhibitor season for Chaos Latin Gamers. They've already got one in the top. They've got a whole lot of minions, and now Ren realizes he has to join this team for what may be the last-ditch desperate fight, but they can't quite do anything as KLG turned back around with the minions up top. Easy to take the inhibitor, and now it's going to be a tour around the base of Young Generation if you're Chaos Latin Gamers.
Yeah, they're just going to walk through the mid lane. They're going to say, we're coming for you next. In fact, they don't even want minions. They're just going to tank it up with Orianna and Lulu's shields. And too busy clearing the base that is in shambles is Young Generation to defend that turret. But still, a desperate fight is the only thing they've got left.
Desperate is definitely the key word there. They're dumping everything they can into MANTARRAYA, and it's barely tickling him. Still, this KLG squad playing together, playing tight. No minions to speak of in the mid, but they've got him in the top, they've got him in the bottom. And as long as they don't present a target, it is hard to see them going down. That last inhibitor's gonna fall, and now they're gonna look to close this one out. MANTARRAYA on the front line. Gets a knock up onto Venus Redemption to keep them nice and healthy. The minions will still keep coming, but KLG, they just take the nice and easy route.
Super safe from both of these teams. Yes, they're forcing forwards into the base. They're not overcommitting. Summoner spells are still going to be there. They know the game will end with the Baron buff and with the super minions that come across. Very well timed on the inhibitor above all else, and now they threaten. They bring in 2 waves of minions. One of them has a super. It's just the Nexus left.
Young Generation, one last desperate attempt to try and save this game, but this tower is already starting to fall. That's one gone down. The fight is also going their way. MANTARRAYA tanking everything up, and he even gets an eat off onto Ren, but Fix has got the final auto attack. Tierwulf tanking through the rest of the Young Generation damage. The final Nexus turret will fall, and soon to be the Nexus. These guys said they wanted to be the next Albix Nox, and this is step 1. GG for Chaos Latin Gamers.
Honestly, just a very well-rounded and strong performance from the team as well. From start to finish, there was only the minor hiccups in the early game, but their vision was good. It was just the miscommunication of where they were going to be. They still got away from the ganks for the most part, and every single move after those mistakes looks like it was cleaned up. They played good League of Legends towards the end as well. No mistakes to be made, no opportunities for the Vietnamese side of Young Generation to come back.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Especially at this stage, you don't often see some clean levels of play from emerging regions as well. And not to say that they don't like to do it, it's just that sometimes you pull the trigger a little faster. Chaos Latin Gamers, they're not that style of team. They play a little more reserved, they play a little controlled. And there was never a point past that mid-game that it seemed like YG could really find an angle on them. A few fights that could have maybe gone their way, but not a lot.
You watch the finals from KLG and you see a lot of team fighting and you're like, all right, these guys like team fighting. Perhaps it was an Isurus thing after all, because it didn't really feel like that was the case. They played their macro League of Legends, pretty good vision control from them overall also, and they just played it clean. And that was a surprise, honestly, but it's a good surprise to see because it means they can play multiple styles of League of Legends, or they've just specially prepared this one for this tournament.
Perhaps, and of course, you saw even in the pick ban phase that they were really doing their homework on Young Generation. Of course, it goes both ways, but I mean, what a fantastic start for this team. They'll have another chance to prove it against a really tough one. Of course, Fnatic up against later this day. I don't know if they could do it this. We'll see what happens next, but now we're going to hear more about that KLG win, so let's send it over to the analyst desk.
Thank you very much, Pyra. A strong start coming in for KLG, but I think the first thing we want to talk about is the team compositions that both teams have put up here and kind of the goals that they were coming into this match with.
Yeah, the big thing for young generations, you see them taking Syndra, Renekton. Anytime you take those two champions, you're going early game. And they wanted to build a big lead. They have the Gragas, who's still very good at making things happen in the early game. You can have good setup in both those lanes. Cho'Gath is notoriously weak in the early game. There should be a lot of things here for young generation to build a big lead and then try and snowball the game.
And we saw that very early on from them. You know, we saw good investment from the fact that they were able to get a good punish down on the bottom side of the map. We saw repeated ganks in the mid lane as well, and they were off to a 5-2 early kill score. So when you look at how the draft plays out and how they started off in the early game, everything's looking pretty positive for the side. And I think that for a team like Young Generations, it's got to be good for your confidence too, especially when you know from a region from the Gigabyte Marines to be able to utilize this early game.
Yeah, maybe a lot of expectations on their shoulders, but let's take a look at that first replay where we look at some of these early kills that came out. I think maybe not, didn't get them in the way we expected to, but still finding kills in a lot of these very close skirmishes.
I find it really impressive that the Syndra was able to roam down fairly early on and just punish the overextended bottom lane. And then the moment KLG tried to get something back, the TP advantage they built up for themselves because of the pressure that Ren was putting up onto his lane counterpart allowed them to get this counterplay, and now you have this bigger disparity between the two mid laners after the return from YG.
Definitely the case. It did feel like after getting some of these kills, there wasn't quite as much focus of team play afterwards. They got the first couple turrets down, but they did a bad job kind of extending that lead. It was actually KLG that was able to grab the first dragon for themselves. Infernal Dragon, exactly what you would have wanted with this comp to try and run away with the game. So some small macro mistakes, and then Ren started losing the matchup to MANTARRAYA, who had a great game overall, got a solo kill, forced him out of lane a couple times, and that's where the game felt like it started going back in KLG's favor.
Yeah, KLG just felt like they were starting to outclass in terms of individual, and it felt like once Young Generation got out of the laning phase, it felt like they weren't quite as proficient at making those plays happen. It felt like a lot of small missteps on the side of Young Generation.
It's one of those things where again, looking at the Gigabyte Marines, these two teams are obviously very different, but one thing we did see was that Gigabyte Marines were very calculated in how they fought. And the slight difference we're seeing here is this team had a lead, and they just tried to put the pressure down without fully respecting the options that their opposition had. And so what we saw around the mid-game was that KLG were very prepared and were looking to try and punish that slight overextend.
Yeah, it was the case, and as we look at that first Baron dropping for KLG, we see how that play starts. We can see very quickly that small missteps or over-aggressive plays, not considering the options that your opponents have, can cost you big time, especially the later and later you move into the game. If you miscalculate on an engage, on a pick, suddenly it can turn against you.
Yep, they see them trying to open up onto Plugo here, but Naul was really struggling to find the final damage in a lot of these plays. You see a lot of missed Ws, a lot of missed Es. He also took Storm Raiders instead of Thunderlords, so there were some different questionable builds potentially that came into effect here, and once that initial kill goes bad, the rest of KLG do a good job collapsing. They find that pick off, and just off that single kill, they're able to turn and grab the Baron, which is all they needed to turn their comp online.
Exactly that, and we talked about comps early on. You're looking at an early game focused style from YG, but then on the side of Chaos Latin Gamers, they were all about that late game team fighting. Sejuani, Orianna, Tristana, even a Lulu in there too. If you get a slight advantage over this early game comp, it becomes very difficult to come back.
And one guy we have to highlight is MANTARRAYA. You already mentioned him. He got a solo kill in a matchup where we may not have expected it. The guy coming in clutch on the Cho'Gath, and this has to feel good once again. We said, hey, Young Generation might feel good in the early game. They might be feeling confident, but KLG coming in swinging and individual players stepping up is a really good look for a team that felt like there was pressure on their shoulders to change some of the perception about their region.
Yeah, and this is how this team actually plays. They're not, like we said, a very explosive early game team. They usually turn online post 15 minutes. And same thing here, MANTARRAYA did a good job of finding those kills later on. Once he started hitting his item power spikes, he was able to get that Righteous Glory, get his tabbies. Suddenly the Renekton can't do anything to him. And then even in the late game, you know, diving turrets, he was very aggressive, far ahead of the rest of his team, trying to find kills. Very bloodthirsty player.
And to be fair, when you're snowballing on a Cho'Gath, I think
feels
that's kind of what we expect when he's got a stone plate and he can start diving 3 turrets. But it was interesting to me. It felt like YG may need to do some adjusting moving forward in the next games. And I wonder, is this a composition issue where we look at, you know, what do they need to draft around? Or is this simply an execution issue on their side in terms of when they look to what to improve next?
To me, it looked like a lot of small mistakes because very early on into the game, to me, it felt like they were doing good things. You know, they were punishing the right lanes, they were clearly playing around their win conditions, but things like, as you rightly identified, the Storm Raiders versus the Thunderlords, some of their builds like Blade of the Ruin King on a Renekton, if they changed some of these small things, maybe they would have been able to better utilize their early game strengths, but also vision was a big thing for me. If you want to try and make those aggressive moves in the mid, you've got to make sure that you have the knowledge of where the enemy is to guarantee that that play is going to work out in success.
I think also just, like you said, a couple of these things had to go a little bit better. We said Naul was missing some skill shots. It's the first game of your tournament. Maybe you're a little nervous. We've seen already, you know, in Group B, Team 1 bounce back very quickly. So this could be the kind of thing where they just have to clean up their play a little bit, figure out exactly how they want to play these situations out, make sure that Renekton isn't getting chased down a long lane, stuff like that.
And interesting too, because when we look at it, if Fnatic are as dominant as we expect them to be, this very well could be the deciding matchup when it comes to who gets the second seed. So now I think a lot of pressure on Young Generation to adapt, come into tomorrow or come into their next matchup really much stronger than they looked in this first game.
And I think there's always the potential to do that, because when we did see Team 1 on the very first day, everyone was like, yeah, there's no way they're making it out of this group, especially how handily they defeated by Direwolves, and then they went back to comfort picks. They seemed to find their grooves. They recognized what was wrong. So I wouldn't count Young Generations out just yet. I still want to see a little bit more from them, and I think their game versus Fnatic later today will give us a better indication.
The other thing that they have up their sleeve as well is Nocti can potentially sub in at some point. That's one thing that we didn't talk that much about with one, was the fact that they swapped their mid laner out to Marv. He was able to come in, make some important plays. You can see the same thing happen here with Young Generation. If they feel like it's not working out with Ren, they can go a different game plan. Nocti has a very different play style, plays a lot of Galio, a lot more team focus, so maybe that's something they need.
Maybe, because we did see some small individual mistakes in terms of kind of the difference in mechanical plays. Renekton losing out to the Cho'Gath in the 1v1 was the one that stood out the most. But when we harken back to KLG, I think it wasn't just MANTARRAYA as much as we're praising him. It did feel like the team in the bottom lane, when we take out or the early ganks coming in, was just outclassing in terms of 2v2 matchup.
Yeah. I was going to say, Fix looked really good. He got caught out once in the team fight, but other than that, he was stomping the bot lane. It gave them a place of pressure to snowball and have something to do in the early game.
All right, well, up next, LJL's Rampage takes on Hong Kong Attitude from the LMS. But before we go, that matchup, Fish is currently standing by for an interview with the victorious top laner.
Thanks, guys. I'm here in MANTARRAYA, top laner from KLG after their victory against YG. That was an impressive performance in the top lane. You took down a Renekton as Cho'Gath, and some people think that should go the complete opposite direction. Tell me how you won that matchup.
Actually, at first, I was a little bit scared because I know that Renekton has a matchup advantage, but I think I made good plays, and with 2 plays, I can solo kill him.
You certainly did, and one of those did lead into a solo kill. It was really impressive, and it was quite back and forth between you and YG for some time, but you definitely had the upper hand. Was the plan to scale up and win in the late game all along, or do you have a different game plan going into that match?
Actually, we have a different matchup style. I think they show us a good performance. Like in mid game, we were like a little bit scared because they were proposing, and we're just farming and scaling up, and then they made a mistake, and we can take the Baron and take them much our favor.
Well, you definitely punished that mistake because you did end up winning that game. Up next, you guys go up against the Season 1 World Champions of Fnatic. How are you guys feeling going into this next match?
I think I feel great. I always wanted to play against a fair seed, or actually a good team from LCS. I think Fnatic is better than us, of course, but I think in one game, we have like 50% to win the game.
Well, best of luck later on. Congratulations on your win just then. We're going to go to a very quick break, but we'll be back with LJL's Rampage taking on... I've lost my words here. LJL's Rampage. We'll be back with the next game, Hong Kong Attitude. See you then.
Got of the week, not going to connect. 2 flashes burned and the power unleashed on top of a heal, and they're going to be able to secure it. BigKoro with the first blood. My goodness, he hasn't been able to get the rupture just yet, but MANTARRAYA, how far does he want to go? And he goes a numbing.
That's not even a level 11 Cho'Gath.
And now we're into fights, baby. Naul trying to get the deletion. He goes down, but he does take Fix with him. Plugo unleashed the power on him, and they even scatter the weak. The shield keeping him alive. And they got a wild growth on now. It's KLG's time to tag in. They pull back Naul, and Fix has got one, but it's going to be Plugo flashing away. And MANTARRAYA is doing double time with a double kill, looking for a third. Can he make it happen? It's Naul and BigKoro going down. Nexus turret will fall, and soon to be the Nexus. These guys said they wanted to be the next Albix Nox, and this is step one. GG for Kaos Latin Gamers.